Good afternoon, members, and thank you for your patience in starting back slightly later than intended. This is just to aid officer preparation. Councillor Robertson. Thank you. Can everyone please check that your devices are muted again? Thank you. Thank you. I have a point of clarification from Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. It's become established tradition that I make this point of clarification so that anyone who wishes to adjust their amendment can update the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I will go to the Leader of the Council. Do you wish to make some changes to your motion, Mr. Leader?
Thanks very much to everybody and the groups, all the groups that I haven't spoken to, and I've said it before and I'll say it again because I think it's true. Nobody's got the monopoly of good ideas or the monopoly of knowledge, and everybody's got different backgrounds. So across this chamber we have a wealth of talent in different areas. So I'd like to thank everybody for being part of this process. I would like to say that if I have missed something in the frantic run around at lunch, my door's always open and we can discuss things and bring them to F&R throughout the year. It shouldn't just be a one-off process where we come up with ideas and then don't do anything moving forward. We have, as a council, put reserves aside that cover many of the areas that we're all concerned with. And so this is an ongoing process, not a final process. So I hope you take advantage of that moving forward through the year. So I've already included several suggestions from across the chamber in my budget, and I referred to them in my speech earlier. I'd like to make it clear that the funding in my budget for biodiversity will include funding for biodiversity villages, and that will be taken through the Climate Change and Sustainable Committee. I would like to also make it clear that the funding for the community resilience will include the £20,000 for the Perth Community Flood Aid. And as we're already due, and I've spoken to Councillor Shires and Councillor Duff because they have good suggestion about funding ASN and other provision for children, or ASL as it is badged under now. The Scottish Government, we're expecting about £700,000 to £730,000 for that, and we'll look forward to take forward their proposals within the budget from that funding, so we don't have to commit another line to it. So thank you to them for bringing forward that proposal. So having listened carefully, I'm happy to make the following adjustments to the SNP group's motion. From the Liberal Democrat group, I'd like to include the Think Yes tenancy sustainment for non-council tenants of £70,000 non-recurring. I'd like to include £40,000 for rural employment, the work placement programme in both years. I'd like to include also for the rural employment, Rural Skills Academy, £66,000 and £34,000 in 2 years. All of this is non-recurring. Ash dieback. Again, this problem it could cost the council about up to £3 million over the next few years. I will accept the Liberal Democrats' suggestion of £200,000 to move on continuously once we have done the mapping exercise. I'd like to include, I was fortunate enough to go down and walk part of the Loch Leven Heritage Trail. It's a very good it covers ticks a lot of the boxes of what we're trying to achieve, and for that reason I'm happy to put £30,000 in year 26-27 and 27-28 because they're an organisation that's able to lever in extra funding. I'd like to put £41,000 in each of the next 2 years for ESOL, that's English for Speakers of Other Languages provision, £53,000 for an Equalities Officer in each of the next 2 years. Quite an innovative one, the P in the Park one, which I learned about compost and toilets, and I think that's been welcomed by all the elected members in Auchterarder. After hearing from the independent group and from the the Liberal Democrat group, I'm happy to put in £50,000 in each of the next 2 years for a scams officer. I think that should really be a scams prevention officer. It would make slightly more sense. Also, for tailored employment, everybody's been put in good suggestions about employability. I'm going to allocate 370,000 to 25-26. That employability has been raised by all the groups today, and I think the suggestion from the Liberal Democrats is worth taking forward on that basis. And again, from various other groups, but for taking this from the Liberal Democrat group, I'm going to put £50,000 into ditch maintenance. From the independent group, I'd like to, and I've got to pronounce this right, allocate 22,000 for putting not flood prevention gates, but gates to prevent people driving through when the Isla is flooded. It saves a vehicle sitting there warning people for up to 3 weeks that they shouldn't cross it. So that's actually a spend to save. So I welcome that from Councillor Colin Stewart. Councillor Dave Cuthbert, there has been several accidents. I've seen them myself in Milnathort. I was going to city centre, but Milnathort centre, Milnathort, and it seems to be a dangerous area at the roundabout there. So I'm happy to incorporate Councillor Cuthbert's recommendation along with Councillor Robertson and Councillor Waters' recommendation to put £130,000 into that area. Also want to include the £50,000 for rural events, and this is all non-recurring funding. I'd also like to include for civic events, which will be moving forward, hopefully some large events coming up, of £25,000 non-recurring to the civic budget. I'd also like to redirect the funding from the Crieff Community Trust to the regeneration initiatives in Crieff. That's there's no cost to that. It's just a redirection of the funding that we already agreed last year. And from the Conservative group, I give the commitment that their suggestions around the ASN, ASL and other things related to benefit the children of Perth and Kinross will be looked at when the funding comes in and through the Finance and Resources Committee process. And I'd also like to wish the best of luck to Bailey Ahern today, when he is a finalist for the work he's done supporting armed forces, and I hope he does very well. He's done very well to get it, and he does a lot of hard work. So I'd like to thank him for his hard work and allocate him an extra £3,000 to his budget for next year, which is the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. So I'm going to accept all that into my budget, and I think it can be put up on the screen, can it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader, and members. That will be emailed to you shortly by committee services so that you can see all of those incorporations. Are there any comments on the motion or the amendment? Before we do that, Councillor Drysdale, you can have to confirm those incorporations.
I am indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no comments, it's going to be a very short meeting. We might get to a 3 o'clock finish, which somebody had requested. Councillor John Rebeck.
Thank you very much, Provost. I believe this is a good progressive budget, but before I speak about some of the positive things we're doing, I think it is just important to remember that people's lives, other employees of Perth and Kinross Council and the broader communities, are affected by the decisions we make today. And there are savings and cuts that I suspect will get taken today that won't be popular by those affected. But just to repeat what our council leader said this morning, we all come in here, whichever political party we're from, and try and do what we think is best for our communities. But on the whole, having said all that, on the whole, it is a good progressive budget. And it's a good progressive budget because it supports culture with investment in Culture Perth and Kinross and the Instrumental Music Service. It supports sport with investment in grass pitches and Jeanfield Community Football Club. And I speak as somebody who's a supporter of Letham, of course, but Jeanfield Swifts are a fantastic community organisation, and this funding is well deserved. It will change people's lives in that area of Perth and beyond. And I think Councillor Drysdale makes a very good point about the diversity of that community, and in particular the fact that they're probably better than anybody else, although Fair City might disagree with that in terms of getting girls involved in football. And it's impressive the work that they do. But this budget also supports business to the tunes of millions of pounds. It supports our strategic housing investment plan. It supports our natural environment in many ways that I'm sure Councillor Waters will speak about. It supports investment in roads and resilience. It turns out we can do potholes and poverty, which is welcome. It supports outdoor learning, which is becoming really important, particularly for some of our young learners with an additional support need. And I'm delighted to support the idea of core communication boards in our school playgrounds. And the £50,000 that we've allocated to outdoor space, I think is really important. And again, I will echo Council's leaders' words. There are things in the Liberal Democrats budget around outreach pupil support resource, which I think are really important. I think we need to have ongoing conversations about when our money comes in from Scottish Government that was allocated in their budget. I think that's to be about £700,000, but also the quiet spaces and other measures which the Conservatives had mentioned in their budget as well. I know that Councillor Shires and Councillor Ahern in particular, and Councillor Cuthbert on Learning and Families, amongst all the colleagues there, are genuine in their support to try and help the challenge of our additional support need. And I think I am assured by officers as well that when the weather's inclement, that our PSAs and our ECPs will have the opportunity to make sure that they're appropriately dressed. I think that's really important as well. Our support staff in schools and nurseries are valued locally. Pay and conditions are settled nationally between COSLA and unions, and as it turns out, are affected by UK Supreme Courts as well. So it's really important that we support our support staff locally when we can. Lastly, but certainly not leastly, this budget does what SNP administrations locally and nationally should do, always have done and always will do. And that is to support those most vulnerable and financially challenged in our communities. We have a superb welfare rights team, and we need to support them, both in terms of staff resource and hard cash to support the cash first principle. This budget also supports food initiatives, including our continued support of holiday activity clubs, which I think is really important, and indeed in food sharing initiatives. Contrary to what was suggested at last week's climate change workshop, food waste is not solely about my regular visits to the cafe in the Letham hub. So the serious measures that we've put forward in our budget today are really important. This budget does all that, and I'll be supporting it. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Reddick. Councillor Braun next, please.
Thanks, Provost. Firstly, could I just offer my thanks as well to Mr. Walker and all his team who have helped us produce our budget and for their work during the last few weeks, and of course today as well. Once again, we find ourselves having to make difficult decisions to find a means to offer a balanced budget at this council meeting today. As my colleague, Councillor Duff, mentioned earlier, we and all local authorities in Scotland have to face these challenges because of the continued lack of funding from the current administration in Holyrood. Against that backdrop, we have worked to produce the Scottish Conservative Amendment presented today, which includes various proposals such as developing a strong economy, enabling children and young people to achieve their full potential, and working with our communities, and importantly, working to reduce poverty. But in doing this, we did not want to add to the burden of those struggling financially already. We have in mind, of course, that water charges are going up, and we've heard now that energy charges are also due to rise after April. And to this end, we've been able to put forward all of these proposals whilst maintaining a council tax rise of 8% this coming year, 8% for 2026-27 and 7.5% in 2027-28. I would like to draw attention to two particular items, small yes, but important nonetheless. Firstly is our support of the Bloom Groups, Path Groups and Friends of Cemeteries. £70,000 for each of the next 2 years. All of these groups are volunteers. They play an important part in keeping our towns and villages looking at their best. We've also included litter groups, often the Bloom Groups themselves, who give up their time to pick litter left by inconsiderate people who just can't be bothered to use a bin, and we've suggested more bins as well. Scotland is a beautiful country and everyone should respect that beauty, either as a resident or a visitor. All of us are concerned with road safety, and that is often thought of as just speeding or bad driving. However, another issue is the difficulty of seeing road signs clearly due to dirt or the growth of trees and bushes. Many of them are directional signs, and today, of course, SatNav overcomes that issue. But many are warning signs, stop signs, and give way signs, and missing them could lead to serious consequences. This is predominantly a rural roads problem, but does occur in our towns as well. And we have proposed £20,000 for the next 2 years, which should hopefully improve the situation. I'd also like to mention in passing that we have continued to commit to the Community Investment Fund, the popularity of which has continued to grow year on year since inception. Local decisions being made on local issues. And again, we propose £400,000. This is a well-balanced budget amendment. It recognises the importance of services, offers ways to improve the lives of many, the need for a good local economy, and recognises the environment in which we live. Provost, we readily sit here often criticising each other. However, we should also recognise when cooperation takes place. It's not a dirty word, and it does get things done. So I'd like to have my thanks to the Leader of the Council for taking on board some of the issues brought forward by our Budget Review Group. I recommend this amendment to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Councillor Massey next, please.
Thank you, Provost. It's been some hours since the Leader and Deputy Leader outlined our SNP motion. I want to take this opportunity to remind you all of some of the great measures our SNP motion has put forward. This SNP budget acknowledges the ongoing financial pressures on families due to the cost of living crisis by allocating funds to the Scottish Welfare Fund, financial and surety funding, and initiatives like the Child Poverty Fund. These funds will provide immediate assistance to families in need. Funding for our community activities such as food and fun programmes during school holidays and the Good Food Nation will further help out families. We are supporting climate change and sustainability within our communities, the Green Living Fund for community projects that will address climate change, enhanced support for local biodiversity and volunteer groups, and funds for improved safety measures like verge cutting. We are developing a resilient community with investment in apprenticeships, training programmes and improved public transport initiatives to bolster local employment, promoting and repurposing of empty buildings for economic use and outlining a commercial property investment strategy. We are empowering our young people with funding for the instrumental music service and development of outdoor learning environments. We are protecting vulnerable populations, focusing on home repair assistance through the Care and Repair programme, providing transformation funding for social care and support for organisations like RASAC, Women's Aid and Buttons and Bows. We are promoting well-being, encouraging mental health initiatives and physical activity through free pitch hires and wellness programmes targeting specific communities such as farmers. We are working in partnership with communities, emphasising the need for investment in community resilience, including funding for local halls and support for cultural institutions like libraries and museums. We are investing in public services, prioritising roads and infrastructure maintenance and community resilience planning to enhance response capabilities during emergencies. Overall, this SNP budget motion aims to create a supportive and self-sufficient environment for residents of Perth and Kinross, addressing immediate needs while laying the groundwork for sustainable community development over the next few years. Thank you. I fully support this SNP budget motion.
Thank you, Councillor Massey. I have Councillor Ian James with a point of clarification.
Thank you very much, Provost. Sorry for the delay. I'm wearing headphones because the loop system doesn't work, so that's why I was late getting the question in, I'm afraid. It was really a question to the leader of the council. He's included quite a lot of extra commitment within his budget, but he didn't say how that would affect his figure or where the money was coming from. Just wondered if that would increase the 9.5% increase, Provost. Thank you.
Mr. Leader.
Well, I'll start off with it will not affect the 9.5 increase. Some of the funding will come from the earmarked reserves that we put forward for the poverty, for can't remember what resilience and everything else, and there will be some extra money coming out of reserves. But I'm sure the man who's paid all the money to count the money will be able to give us a better summing up than I've just done.
I mean, so it is no bottom of the sheet has been sent around to elected members, Councillor James, so you can see the distribution of where the money is coming from there. Okay, thank you. Next comment is from Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like, as with so many others, would like to thank Scott Walker and his finance team, indeed many other council officers, for the work they have put in here. And I think I would single out Claire Mailer and Lisa Potter, and their efforts have been immense. I think in general we face many challenges, multiple constraints, yet compared to only 6 months ago, we are in a better place. In part, that is due to Scottish Government funding, but it's also in part to efficiencies that have been driven already by this council, not least as part of the transformation programme. I'll say more on that in just a second. Despite the difficulties we have encountered, we've managed to come in with a council tax increase of 9.5%, and we just had that confirmed a second ago. Slightly below the 10% indicated in the medium-term financial plan last November. Moreover, we've kept our uncommitted reserves not just within the 2 to 4% range, but much nearer to the figure of 4%. I think we've been prudent, taken care, and yet also inclusive, again, as we've seen just a few minutes ago, and that should stand us in good stead over future years. But beyond having just sound council finances, there are many, many positives, I believe, about this budget. I'm just going to take two of them and then conclude. The first is on the commercial property investment programme. I really think that's significant because it's 7 million of additional capital investment to add to the 2 million ongoing. That's 9 million. It's not just Perth centric, it's not at all. I take in West Perthshire, Blackford, the Creach in Crieff, and down in Kinross, and this is a real, we can have various funds, micro funds, support funds, that's great. But to give actual facilities to small and medium-sized enterprises, to entrepreneurs, I think it's a real help, and I think it's going to pay real benefits to the business community over the next few years. Finally, I want to say on artificial intelligence and the strategic programme, because that very much fits into the whole transformation programme. And we're going to hear quite a bit more on that at Finance and Resources at the end of April. But the figures, it's absolutely important we get the governance of AI right and early on. And we also seek to allay the concerns that local residents might have about it. But I think the benefits are immense. 500,000 in year one, then an additional going up to 750,000 in year two and beyond. and it's money I think we have to spend, and it almost pervades, almost transcends all the other transformation programmes that are set out in Appendix 4, Appendix A of the report. And it's something that we have to do. And yes, there are efficiency targets. I think in the last year we set a target of 1 million, but I actually suspect the benefits will be much larger than that. Some of them which we will not be able to define precisely and exactly, because they just go through so many of these change programs that we have on areas like customer services, on additional support needs, on public transport, on employability. And it's something we just have to do, or else we will fall behind. I totally support this very, I believe, positive budget, and let's get behind it and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Provost. I welcome the support for the budget proposal to fund our rural libraries. Auchterarder Institute and Library was opened by Andrew Carnegie in 1896. Not been using it that long, but certainly since the 60s. He said a library outranks any other thing a community can do to benefit its people. It's a never-failing spring in the desert. Now, times have changed dramatically since 1896, indeed, also since the 60s, and I believe that the way we operate our libraries needs to change, and with the council and communities working together over the next few years, I believe we can ensure that the never-failing spring in the desert does indeed run on. I thank the campaigners from the rural libraries for giving air to the facilities available in our libraries and increasing awareness of them. I hope we can rely on their support and help transforming our libraries for the future. Before I was a councillor, I was active as a community councillor and also helped drive forward the local community action plan, which has been transformative for many towns and villages in the county, as well as Auchterarder and Aberthin. I was part of a Brother Blaze group, so I'm delighted that the budget amendment reinstates core funding for local bloom groups, knowing firsthand what a difference it makes to volunteers and gives the capacity to deliver big projects and lever in additional funding and boosting enthusiasm of the people all over the county. The future of PKC lies in cooperating with communities and jointly making our communities fairer and more inclusive for all. Examples of this are the Auchterarder Town Bus, a Tom Gray legacy from his time in the council, and Methil Community Transport Group, all run by volunteers and increasing their usage. These are supported by the amendments in the rural transport. I also support the work done by Auchterarder Community Sport and Recreation Green Space in their P in the Park project, a green and sustainable solution to toilet facilities in Victoria Park, Auchterarder. This will go to reinstate a public toilet in the town, where options are limited to the nearest tree at the moment. This will support users of the new cycle pump track that is opening soon and the highly successful play park facilities created for the community with the support of the council, local and national funders, and more importantly, volunteers. These are examples of the impact communities working together with PKC can make enhancing local services and facilities. They should be an inspiration to other groups at what can be achieved. To all officers, strategic leads, provost and fellow councillors, I thank you all for your hard work and support during my first budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Just to reiterate the point I've put in the chat, but for anyone who's not watching the chat, if any other councillors wish to put a speaking request in, if they can do so now, because I have well over 20 councillors wanting to speak. Next is Councillor Steve Carr.
Thank you. I'd also like to echo the comments from fellow councillor Watt with regards to the amazing work that's been done in Auchterarder. The future of the libraries has been a very emotive subject over the past few months, and as we heard this morning, the library is so much more than simply somewhere to collect books. It's an important role within the community, and it should not be overlooked. So from a personal point of view, I'm very pleased to see that the immediate future of the Auchterarder Library has been secured. Again, on a personal level, as Councillor Watt has mentioned, we welcome the funding for the P in the Park project in Auchterarder. The investment in the park facilities over the past few years with the new play areas and the imminent opening of the new pump track means that the increased community usage of the park needs these additional toilet facilities. So it's great to see the funding being made available for them. And as Councillor Watt also mentioned, the Auchterarder town bus will assist those with mobility issues, the ability to continue to access the park and all of the excellent facilities within the town, as well as the travel to the important healthcare appointments. In a wider context, I also welcome the agreement to include the Liberal Democrats' proposal to include funding for English language classes through ESOL. With the war raging on in Ukraine, it's a commendable project that we continue to assist the displaced Ukrainians that we have provided a safe environment for within Perth and Kinross. So I welcome the budget proposals.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Councillor Robertson next.
Thank you, Provost. I think I can honestly say that I have sat through more council budgets than anyone else in this room. I'm quite confident in saying that. And I have to say that this has been one of the most satisfying budgets that I've actually sat through. I think the leader of the council should be praised and recognised for the inclusive approach he's taken to the budget process. I think every political group and individual here has got a contribution to make. And I think Councillor Lang has recognised that in the way he's modified his budget motion. So I'm very pleased with that, and I hope that that approach continues in the years ahead. I warmly welcome the spending that we have identified for additional road safety measures, especially in Milnathort, and that was raised by Councillor Cuthbert, and I'm very pleased indeed that he did. And also for the additional funding for road maintenance and drainage. I'm also really pleased that we've managed to protect the libraries that we have remaining, because as the speaker to the motion earlier on said, they're such a valuable part of local communities, and I think we could make more use of them. I'm pleased that we've managed to preserve the Community Investment Fund. The Community Investment Fund, I don't know in other areas, but in Kinrossshire, very often you're giving money out to like village halls and things, and they use that funding to actually lever in other funding. So we actually get far more bang for our buck than we would in other ways. And likewise, I'm really pleased that the instrumental music service the funding for that has been continued. All in all, a very, very good budget, I think, in difficult circumstances, but it's one that I'll certainly be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I think certainly you probably have the longest service on that side of the desk. I think there might be a few officers who have been in this chamber doing budgets for longer than that. Mr. Walker, of course, has been doing it since he was a young teenager, and that was just a short time ago, of course, but might just extend slightly beyond your service. Councillor Frampton next, please.
Thank you, Provost. A few months ago, I was pleased to attend the unveiling of the Speech and Language Core Board initiative that was funded by the Mervyn Park Committee to aid communication for children and families with additional support needs at play in a park environment. With additional support needs increasing in our schools, the display of core boards will be an effective tool to help aid and benefit our children, young people and staff in our school playgrounds for communication purposes, which will enhance the school playground activities and experiences of children with communication difficulties to feel included in the playground. I am pleased that the SNP motion has brought forward funding for the core communication boards for our Perth and Kinross schools.
Thank you, Councillor Frampton. We now go to Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to thank Scott and his team for their tireless working, their diligence, and doing everything with a great deal of professionalism. It's actually quite sobering at times, given that I couldn't give as much time as they genuinely did. They were never short to make themselves available. They also carried out their work with a great sense of humour, which is imperative when you're working with me. So thank you for that. Yeah. It's really disappointing as well that despite many requests, they never once tried to share the other groups' strategies and budgets. So we were quite put off by that. As everybody knows, I'm a fervent supporter of library services. It served my young family well, and I hope that library services are available to other families for many, many years to come. It is important, however, that we use the next 2 years of funding for understanding the needs and requirements of a full library service going forward. Hannah Wicks spoke on behalf of libraries this morning. I think she did a great job, not only in making her presentation, but also in her ability to eloquently answer each of the questions put to her. Anyway, I'm delighted that there's a consensus view to save the libraries through funding to Culture, Perth and Kinross, and look forward to seeing how that develops over the next 2 years. I'm particularly thankful to the leader of the council, who was receptive to my approach to fund the Auchterarder bus group and running the Auchterarder town bus service. This is great news. It staves off the worry that the group had that the bus would disappear without the necessary funding. They've been reliant on grants until now, and unfortunately, when you keep knocking on doors, eventually they close. So what we've done this year is fantastic and saves that bus service. I'm also chuffed with the Community Investment Fund money, with the money that we're putting in to save the music. And just to finish, Conservative Group amendment invests in roads and verges, as these are needing immediate attention. The Conservative Group amendment solves many of the current issues that we all face. It saves our library services, and it gives Perth and Kinross residents an 8% uplift in their council tax, which is significantly less than the SNP and the Liberal Dem groups. I commend our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Allen. Councillor Harvey next, please.
Thank you very much, Provost, and I'd like to share my thanks to all the officers and all the other councillors that were involved in this. This is a lot of hard work. I wasn't involved in it as much, and I appreciate all the hard work that's been done here. I particularly commend the collegiate manner that's been undertaken here, where other groups' views and inputs have been taken, and I think that's the best way of serving the people of Perth and Kinross, and I assume that's going to happen going forward. I'll be brief and just want to make a couple of minor comments about the budget, some of the budget issues. The issue of investment in AI and looking forward to what might be happening with AI in future, I think, is a very good strategic investment and puts us ahead of the curve to some extent. I know there's a lot of positive aspects of AI, but there's also some negative ones. So if we can find if there is improvements that can be made and to the budget, I think we should look into that, and I commend that. I'd also like to thank Bailey for his suggestion regarding the Aero bus service, the early bus service, which was suggested to us, something I hadn't picked up myself, and I thank him for that. And I think that will help the people of Aero and the wider cars. Additionally, the issue of grass cutting has been mentioned by some of the other councillors, and verge cutting, and the fact that we've added something to the budget to this. The climate is changing. We're getting wetter and hotter climates, so the verges are growing greater than before, obscuring signs and such like. So I think that's a very good measure too. These particular points, along with the whole of the budget moves, I totally support, and I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Councillor McCall next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'm going to confine my comments to the health and social care aspects of this budget, which are very welcome. Provost and councillor colleagues, it's been said that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. Gandhi was, as far as I can determine, the person who first made this statement, but it has been widely quoted by many who make decisions on how we provide and fund services for all of our citizens, especially those who are the most vulnerable and who have the most need. Across Scotland, there is more demand and complexity placed upon care and support services generally, and Perth and Kinross is not immune from this. But we do face some specific issues, including the rurality of our geography and that we have the largest percentage of our citizens over the age of 85 than any other council in mainland Scotland. So protecting the funding for our core social care services is vital. At our December council meeting, we approved the provisional revenue budget that included an increase to the contribution to the Health and Social Care Partnership by 6.7 million to a total of 106.133 million for 2025-26, and then recurring. This core recurring funding will protect vital social care services for families, friends and neighbours to help ensure that as many as possible can lead safe and independent lives in their own homes and local communities. That we have cross-party support for this funding is welcome and a mark of the commitment and collegiate working of this council administration and councillor colleagues who serve in the Integration Joint Board. Councillor Colin Stewart, who's the current IGB chair, and councillors Michelle Frampton and David Illingworth. Achieving this consensus is also testament to the engagement and transparency with all elected members, from the Health and Social Care Partnership Chief Officer and the Finance Director and the wider Health and Social Care team. And I thank them very much for their hard work and their patience. As well as the additional 6.7 million increase to core recurring funding, I'm also pleased that the SNP motion has identified a further 200k for organisations who provide valuable support across a range of services. There's 60k to community support groups such as Men's Shed, Women's Wellbeing Club, Andy's Man Club and Mindspace, 30,000 to RISAC, 30,000 to Women's Aid, 70,000 to the Nuke, and 10k to Farmstrong. And I want to thank Councillor Bailey Claire McLaren for championing the work of this group. As someone with a family background in rural communities, I'm very much aware of how vital a service this is. Provost, I mentioned earlier that we in Perth and Kinross have some challenges that are specific to our council. The SNP motion recognises there are geographical challenges. There is 100k to support investment in community-led initiatives to provide care and support in remote and rural areas. It's very welcome and I support it wholeheartedly. Colleagues, Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership benchmarks very well compared to elsewhere in Scotland. This is as a result of a focus over recent years on efficiency and continuous improvement. But we have some significant challenges going forward to ensure that we can continue to deliver and improve essential social care services. Not least that we are facing ongoing increases in complexity and in demand in several key areas. And while there will continue to be a focus on efficiency and continuous improvement in our current service delivery, there is very little, if any, low-hanging fruit left to harvest. Therefore, we need to develop transformative and innovative approaches in social care to support early intervention, to promote the shift and balance of care from hospital to community, and to strengthen the work of the Health and Social Care Partnership to prevent admissions to hospitals and avoid longer than necessary hospital stays. So I am delighted, therefore, that the SNP motion has recognised these challenges and has earmarked a total of £1 million over the next 2 years for fundamental transformation across all of social care. The SNP budget motion includes a total of £8 million additional funding to Health and Social Care Partnership and third-party service providers. It's very welcome, it's very much needed, and it will protect the most vulnerable in our society. I will be supporting the motion and commend it to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor McEwen next, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. I think listening to the leader's amendment to his motion and all the other comments in the chamber, I must be the only councillor you're not back with ideas of how to amend our budget. So I think we're going to have a wee meeting about that, Councillor Lane. Anyways, Provost, I always thought this would be an interesting budget. Now, we've had 14 years of the Tories in London and we've now got the Labour Party with all their electioneering promises. So we'll see what happens there. The Scottish Government passed their budget yesterday, but that was done in a collaborative way across the chamber down there, and I hope that's the case here in Perth and Kinross. Initially, we had fears that we were going to get flat cash settlement, but it's turned out that we're going to end up with an earmarked increase of 2.2%, and I think this is much welcomed and very evident within the SNP budget. Tackling poverty and helping some of the most vulnerable in our communities has been the main priority of this administration. Financial and Security Fund, Scottish Welfare Fund, and increased money for the Welfare Rights Team shows our commitment to supporting the most vulnerable in our society. I don't see this in everybody's budget in this chamber, and that surprises me.
Tackling climate change is also a main priority that we've brought forward. Our community groups do a power of work in this area, and we are funding for biodiversity, Friends of Cemeteries and Bloom groups. I know that we'll use this money really well. Biodiversity and the Council's Grow Well project will receive £200,000 over the next 2 years, an extra resource to improve how we grow and maintain these areas with pollinators and a variety of trees. The return of the Green Living Fund is welcome as a participatory budgeting process as it was before, and this will give communities the ability to follow in the footsteps of the groups who presented at the Climate Committee last week. In my ward, buildings like the Bigger Ratty Development Trust toilets and the Ratry Hall, run by Elder Voice, will have the chance to look at green energy solutions and savings in their buildings, like has happened at St Meadows and at Glen Park. Again, we see the Community Investment Fund and separate PB funding as previous years, and I look forward to discussions on this at the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee. We see investment in surface water management schemes in my ward, with surface water diversion and leaky dams for the Ratry burn. This is much needed and widely supported in the community and amongst its elected members. Alongside Community Resilience Fund, a reserve of £775,000 to support communities when they need it. Funding a vulnerable persons database will also enhance the safety of those who live in our communities. Commercial property investment of £1.1 million will be spent for rented new commercial units on the Welton Road in Blairgowrie, and a PKC-wide investment of £7 million will boost our economy. Late night opening of recycling centres will help meet a demand from residents and business users to dispose of and recycle in their communities, and I look forward to further report from the service to advise for further changes in the future. Caring for our most vulnerable is also achieved by funding the care and repair service, supporting health and social care offerings, supporting people who live longer to remain in their home, supported by the Health and Social Care Partnership, so eloquently just described by Councillor McCall. Intensive housing support is again funded and ensures our tenants maintain their tenancy, preventing complex homelessness. That costs this council money. Both these initiatives are spent to save solutions and a prudent use of the council's resources. Funding for RASAC, Women's Aid, Farm Strong, community mental health groups and the NUC are funding choices that make a real difference to those who rely on these services and help with the drive to prevent violence against women and girls, which we promote support as a council through our 16 days of activism activities each November. Provost, I support the SNP amendment for this year's budget and process, and in due course I hope others in the chamber are able to do so also. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Bailey Williamson next, please.
Thank you very much, Provost. Could I just endorse Councillor McEwen's comments about the additional funding for welfare rights? I would also welcome the proposal to extend the opening hours of the recycling centre for additional 2 hours for 1 day per week during the summer months. This will support the council in maintaining its recycling targets and support our communities and businesses in Blairgowrie, Crieff, Kinross, Pitlochry, along with the 2 depots at Friarton and Inveralmond. I think I'd like to welcome the additional 70,000 for the additional cutting on our road verges, which is going to go to support our road safety on our major roads. The continued funding for RASAC and Women's Aid has been identified as a priority for most groups. I'm sure that this additional funding will assist their vital work within our communities. I'm also sure it will give some reassurance to the women who use or who are required to use the service. With our ageing population and social isolation within rural areas, I am certain that the additional 50,000 investment into a new model of care and support within our rural communities will continue to give people greater dignity and access and smooth the access to services for our ageing population.
Thank you, Bailey Williamson. Councillor Liz Barrett next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'd also like to add my thanks to all of the finance team and the teams across the council for all their work on the budget and their endless patience with our questions and our constant changes. I welcome Councillor Lang's recognition that the SNP's previous approach to council tax is not sustainable, and I thank him for proposing a realistic level to put our finances on a sounder footing so that today we're not facing swathes of cuts to services to our communities and to jobs for our own workforce and for those who deliver many of the services that we rely on. I'd also like to thank him for listening to and incorporating many of our ideas over the last few weeks. and so many of our proposals into the motion this afternoon. I'm sorry we face bringing such large increases in council tax this year, but we do need this to recover from the years of SNP government council tax freeze, another real cut to funding for councils with another below inflation increase, and the huge challenges faced by the council and our partners, especially in social care delivery. Our common goal is a Perth and Kinross where everyone can live life well, free from poverty and inequality. I never forget that I was elected on a promise of fairness to protect services for those who need them most and safeguarding opportunities for our young people. There are over 27,000 people living in poverty across Perth and Kinross, and almost 6,000 of them are children. The Anti-Poverty Reserve can help provide more staff for our brilliant welfare rights team who makes such a difference to the most vulnerable, and funds to help those in need through welfare rights advice and swift, effective distribution of the financial insecurity and Scottish welfare funds to those who are in greatest need. The tailored employability support in our most deprived areas will provide targeted help, family by family, to lift individual families out of poverty by removing barriers to their employment in job and into jobs that pay enough for them to live on. It's vital that we as a council take action and help our brilliant community groups to take action on the climate change and biodiversity emergencies. Last year, the Scottish Government abandoned its target for a 75% cut in carbon emissions by 2030, and this week it was confirmed that it's projected to miss its legally binding climate change target of net zero emissions by 2045. We as a council can only directly impact 3% of the emissions in Perth and Kinross, and I'm proud of our clear commitment to PKC's climate action plan, including extension of the Green Living Fund, sustainable community transport, action on biodiversity, including supporting more biodiversity towns and villages, thank you Grant, community resilience, supporting green space volunteer groups and tackling ash dieback. After last week's fantastic showcase of just some of the community projects that benefited from the Green Living Fund to tackle climate change and the cost of living, this week I saw more of the difference made by Perth Community Flood Aid, which was set up less than 2 years ago. Working closely with PKC's resilience team to secure external funds and then make the very best of resources between them, they're a great example of council and community working together, and I'm very pleased that we're directing 20,000 to help them put in more practical improvements to reduce flood risk along the Craigie Burn and elsewhere, to enable them to support individuals and to communicate with vulnerable residents who can't access information online about resilience. They're also sharing their experience to benefit wider areas in Perth and beyond. I'm also passionate about opportunities for our young people. Last year, the Lib Dems were the only group to oppose cuts to the instrumental music service, and I'm very pleased to see that other groups have seen the light on this today. As well as the rural training and employment schemes described by Billy McLaren, our amendment proposes 180,000 for modern apprentices and graduate trainee places in the council to give more opportunities to our young people for training and employment. We also welcome the commitment to holiday food and fun for children from low-income families, but I'm sure that Councillor Rebeck shares my disappointment that our proposal for more support and training for pupil support assistants to give more support to pupils with additional support needs and reduce the impact of disruptive behaviour on the rest of classes has not been accepted, and I do hope this can be looked at in the light of the newly announced Scottish Government funding. We also propose to invest 100,000 in play areas to help children's well-being and free access to open places to play, and I hope that can also be looked at again. I will be supporting our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Shires next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Can I, like others, thank the finance teams and officers and Councillor Lang for his collaborative approach during our budget discussions. Our budgets all have clear differences, not least on our final council tax rates, but there are shared objectives, which is encouraging to see. However, having praised Councillor Lang, I've got a further request. As we finalise this year's budget, can I urge every councillor to take the opportunity to lobby Holyrood for a long overdue review of the outdated and unfair local government funding system? The current one-year finance settlements severely restrict our ability to plan and execute long-term strategic initiatives. Imagine the transformative impact we could achieve with a secure, longer-term local government settlement, improving health and social care, driving economic growth and tackling climate change. We would then be able to really deliver long-term transformational projects safe in the knowledge of what our funding would be over a given period. Our budgets have been constrained by council tax freezes, and we're now seeing the impact of these. Whilst at Holyrood audit reports show waste to the tune of astronomical sums, we're in a position where we're having to raise council tax levels to those not seen before. A robust and fair funding system is essential. It would empower us to further support our young and elderly residents and maintain fair local tax rates within the broader national context. The Scottish Conservative Budget Amendment highlights our commitment to our young people through IMS and promotes economic growth, town centre revitalisation and community support. Following Councillor Lane taking on board our proposal for a small pot of funding last year, and I do welcome the commitment to allocate funds which we hope to receive from the Scottish Government, we allocated funds for essential classroom alterations to support additional support needs in education. I've seen for myself the difference this small amount of money makes. Many of us have been part of the review of additional support needs across our schools, and we know that as the transformation programme continues, there will be a need for significant sums to be invested in improvement. We know that our teachers can make small pots of money go a very long way and make a big difference. I too am pleased that the Community Investment Fund, a policy that came into being in the last administration, continues to provide much needed funding for community-led initiatives. I welcome the cross-party commitment to investing in flood prevention measures in Blairgowrie and Rattray, and thank Councillor Lane for incorporating funding as we have. I would highlight our excellent flooding team who came up with these affordable solutions and taught us all about leaky dams. Our group are prioritising gully emptying across Perth and Kinross to help address the issues of flooding in the area. We've also allocated funding to improving the cleanliness and appearance of our town centres to help boost visitor numbers and make our towns nicer places to live in, to shop in and to visit. Finally, we've allocated funding to supporting the Modern Apprentice programme in the council. Having had the pleasure of meeting young people who have completed the programme, and there's quite a few of our officers who went through that programme and have gone on to work in the council, I think it's important we continue to grow our own workforce and help young people into work. By demonstrating our commitment to this, we believe it will encourage other private businesses to do the same and help more local young people into skilled, well-paying employment, whilst helping the council develop our workforce for the future. This budget's not just about numbers, it's about building stronger, more resilient and vibrant communities, and I wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Next, the Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much, Provost. I want to commend to people the inclusion in our motion of the free buses for the next year following on from the first successful year and its slight extension. It's all part of making provision for those with least resource in our society and seeking to persuade others to make different transport choices. And it's part of increasingly seeing public transport as a public service where others are well ahead of us, places like Luxembourg, Estonia, Melbourne, Belgrade. And I'm delighted to see in recent days Glasgow seeking to do something similar but different from us to take that forwards. So to me, that particular provision is an important part of our motion today. Can I also say, though, that I welcome seeing from the independents their proposals with regard to Kinross and Ballinloig. The direction that that's going in, to me, is part of the strategic vision we need to be adopting here, building on our mobility strategy that we have, and I'm hoping that we can in the future work with through TACTRAN and with Transport Scotland to actually build a strategic direction for transport here that meets the challenges of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Councillor Waters next.
Thank you, Provost. Just thank you again to the finance team for their patience with me being involved in the budget process for the first time, and probably more importantly, thanks to Grant Lane for his patience as well. Following on from the hugely successful climate change and sustainability meeting last week, where numerous successful applicants to the Green Living Fund shared how the funding they received was crucial to help deliver successful climate change projects for their communities. The further allocation of £200,000 will help trigger greater funding for local community groups to deliver projects that address the climate change and biodiversity emergencies. Bloom groups, biodiversity groups and friend of cemetery groups do some amazing work, whether it's planters, enhance nature and biodiversity in our graveyards, or the numerous biodiversity groups planting and managing orchards or meadowlands to feed our endangered bee population. We will help to support these groups by allocating an additional 42,000 recurring and giving an additional funding of £20,000 for the next 2 years to allow the groups to buy trees, shrubs, plants and seed to facilitate their work. The decline of pollinators is a significant environmental concern with severe implications for biodiversity, agriculture and ecosystems. Within the Council, the Grow Wild and Biodiversity Town and Village projects are seeking to help address this by building habitats for bees, butterflies and hoverflies and try to reverse the significant decline in their numbers. As we roll out the Grow Wild project throughout the Council area, officers will continue to engage and work with local communities and groups. An extra £200,000 funding will allow the employment of an additional officer to assist with this and to provide extra groundsmen to work with communities and help plant trees, set out and plant orchards or sow meadowlands to help reverse the loss of habitats for bees and other pollinators. When we also add the Scottish Government's Nature Restoration Fund of 232,000, we are showing our commitment to the climate and biodiversity emergencies. Ash trees play a significant role in the ecosystem, and ash dieback will impact severely on this, damaging and destroying any infected tree and impacting on the numerous species and habitats that depend on the trees. Ash dieback can also create major resilience issues throughout the Council area. Any affected trees will deteriorate and become weaker and brittle as the disease takes hold. Subsequently, any fallen branches or trees themselves can fall down and block roads, paths, or impact on the safety of visitors to our green spaces. Within the SNP group, we are committed to proactively build a resilient council area. We will fund a survey to determine the scale of the issue and enable officers to build a strategy to proactively deal with the challenge, including removing infected trees before they reach a dangerous condition and replant with suitable replacement trees to minimise the ecological and biodiversity harm caused by the removal. Regarding the tracks funding, this is a huge from a Kinrossshire perspective. The Heritage Trail plays an important role within Kinrossshire and within tourism, and thanks to Councillor Robertson for bringing this forward. The crossing in Milnathort followed on from a recent meeting with council officers, with Councillor Cuthbert, Community Council and local residents. Regarding that, I would request that it looks the crossings which fit in with our Kinross active travel plan and with safe routes to school, but also look at soft speed enforcement techniques within the lights, so they go to red if people are speeding along that section of road, which happens quite often. And I'll finally just a big thanks for the commercial property investment funding. I think this is an excellent idea and will have a big local impact, not just in Kinrossshire but across the whole council area, and hopefully build a more resilient kind of local economy within the area. I will happily back this budget and feel it is an exceptional budget given the constraints we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Anderson next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief in my comments. My main interest in the budget today as such was with the Library Savings School Library and the other libraries in Ward 2. And we're very pleased, all councillors present here from Ward 2, in the result. But it does give us one of the benefits of what's happened as such that we have supporting groups to develop the libraries, to have retain the libraries and improve the libraries in their own areas. And we've got a starting block there, which the ALIO that is responsible for them on behalf of the council know who to talk to and develop things within the next 2 years. I remember the budget in 22, Schoolman's missed out on the closures by mistake. It wasn't written in the documents we were studying, but it came to life the following year when we were saying, well, you've 11 months to go, or 11, we could be shot. So we have the starting of something good from that, and I hope they will communicate with the user groups in each library, and hopefully things will develop. We've another one to say Cooper Angus, which could have some assistance from the budget retention to do something better there in the communications with the main library, etc., to develop Cooper Angus back again and get youth involved. That's all I'll say on behalf of just thank you for the budget. There's many other things I'd like to comment on, except I say I was at Scone Library at the opening of it in 1890, sorry. 1990. So I didn't want to see the death of it. So I'm looking forward to it. I didn't see the other fighters later on this year, but surviving. The other thing, I was at the opening of the Perth Leisure Pool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Mayer next, please.
Thank you. I was delighted to see that both the Liberal Democrats and the independent group of councillors have proposed £50,000 to be invested in the role of a scams prevention officer. As the older persons champion for Perth and Kinross Council, I'm very much aware of how many scams are deliberately aimed at older and more vulnerable people in society, deliberately targeting these groups as they may potentially have savings and pension pots which could be accessed and looted. It can be difficult for even the most tech-savvy or financially aware of us to always accurately identify potential attempts to defraud. However, many older people can be particularly susceptible to such attempts. It's imperative that in this age, where we are not only at the mercy of determined attempts to gain access to bank account details, etc., by scam phone calls, emails, and the like, we are now also being targeted by ever more sophisticated AI-generated fraud materials. The role of education about how to identify potential fraud and how to avoid falling into the traps these criminals set for us all can only be adequately fulfilled if there's a dedicated member of P&K staff entrusted with that task and able to roll out relevant awareness training to community groups and forums for older and vulnerable people. On behalf of all those who will be protected from harms by this P&K Council funded post holder, I'd like to thank the Lib Dem and independent colleagues for their inclusion of this important role in their budget submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayer. Councillor Cuthbert next, please.
Playing silly, whatever's. Yeah, I'd want to take a slightly different line. In terms of this budget, it's a 9.5% increase that looks likely we're probably going to end up with the SNP budget. That will appear to a lot of our constituents as a huge increase, and I'm sure they're going to be, some of them are going to be upset by that. But I just wanted to reassure them that the independent group have looked really carefully. We put forward a 7.5% increase, and that was as low as we could get realistically. So it's just really to say that the 9.5% isn't ripping people off. It's a reasonable figure given the situation we're finding ourselves in. What I would like to say as well is that the independent group have, as Colin has said, we focused on business and so on. But one of the things we wanted to make sure was that in the things we were doing here, we were doing things for the community who pay the council tax to make sure they're getting benefit from what we're charging them for, if you like. So you can see things like the bloom groups, the some of the changes we put through on grass cutting, the budget for rural events, the reversal of the instrumental music, the scams officer has just been mentioned, increasing community council funding and reversing the library cuts. These are all things that I think will benefit the people who are paying the council tax. So I applaud the fact they've been included. I wanted to also thank Scott and his team for their resilience to our continuous questions and so on. I also want to thank the strategic leads. We met up with 6 of the strategic leads, and it was, I think, a very useful exercise in doing so. And finally, I want to thank Grant, who's been running around all day, and the last 6 weeks, I would say, he's been running around like a mad thing. And I think he's been really tolerant and he's listened, which is good. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Provost. I want to begin by speaking about buses, and I also want to specifically thank Councillor Lang for his willingness to work across the chamber and being willing to take on ideas from some opposition councils. And I specifically welcome the funding to kickstart a local community-owned transport service in the Carsagowrie. And as Councillor Lang has said, no one has the monopoly on good ideas. And I'm hopeful this funding will allow a small but very motivated group to get on with the job of making this happen. But while I'm on the subject of Councillor Lang, I would just need to gently point out to him that the extended producer responsibility was not a Scottish Government initiative, rather it's a UK-wide scheme, and I, for one, am delighted this funding goes nowhere near the Scottish Government, rather it's handed directly to us to use as we feel fit. That's true devolution in action, and we need to see more of it. I'm sure that despite my thanks for his willingness to work cross-party, he will understand that it's a budget I simply can't support. I've said many times that I could never vote for a double-digit rise in council tax. Now, I accept it's not quite the 10% that was mooted, but it's pretty close. And looking around at other budgets in the chamber and indeed across Scotland, and with even the independents looking for an increase of 7.5%, and Colin, I'm really disappointed in you, it's clear that we are just not being funded appropriately by the Scottish Government. Councillor Duff made reference to that earlier today. But yet again, the Liberal Democrat budget comes in at the highest council tax across the chamber. And I really had hoped that with the Conservative influence in that group now, that would have made a difference, but it seems we still have some work to do there. And reading their budget in more detail, I was quite surprised to see some money for play parts, and clearly Councillor Barrett's not quite as on top of the SNP manifesto as I am. And had he been so, then he would know that the SNP have promised to renew every play park in Scotland. And if John Swinney says it, then in my view, it's bound to happen. We know that in the past, when the Scottish Government's back is against the wall, they will always find some money down the back of the Butte House sofa. And when that happens, it's often local government that wins. So you would understand my horror, Provost, to see Labour cave in quite so quickly and agree to let their budget pass. If only they had the courage to drag this out a little bit longer, we may have had some more money which we could allocate to reducing the council tax rates for the people across Perth and Kinross. And there will be surprise yet again across the chamber to find me agreeing once again with Councillor Lang today on yet another point, and that's national insurance. He touched on that earlier. And while our direct costs have been covered by the UK Government, we don't have funding for outside bodies or PKC suppliers. So not only does this detrimentally impact local small businesses, it also creates a huge financial impact on the council, all against the promise by the Labour Government not to increase national insurance. And I'm pleased to see other groups making commitments to reinstating grass verge cutting. I've been saying this for a very long time, and I'm glad others are finally catching up with us, but we need to go further than has been proposed today. That's a job for another year. And with all of us proposing higher than wanted levels of council tax, as I said earlier, this indicates very little wriggle room and a very poor funding settlement from the Scottish Government. And John Swinney was quoted recently as saying, "I've placed such importance on ensuring we include a fair funding settlement for local government." Well, I'm afraid today's debate throws that theory completely under a bus.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to start by thanking the Independent and the SNP groups for incorporating monies to protect the early morning Errol to Perth bus service. It's unfortunate that that's necessary at this point, but hopefully it will be one of the last stopgaps before we know what the long-term sustainable bus model is as a result of the funding for Buses 2030, which was allocated last year over 3 years. I'd like to talk about tax next. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Council tax is a regressive tax. Increasing it disproportionately impacts those on lower incomes. This is a reality that's been reflected in the manifesto pledges for council tax reform for both my own party and the SNP, plus I think others in Scotland for over 15 years now. While welfare funding is welcome, while council tax is regressive, there's a very real risk that we're solving poverty by making the poor pay for it. I worry further that many of today's budget proposals are inefficient. They spend money only to avoid hard choices in this chamber. They spend the money because it's there. In the private sector, nobody sets pricing before they know their cost base. Netflix emailed me this morning telling me my price is going up. Did they do that because they merely think they might experience higher costs this year? No. They'll have run the numbers and will have only taken the bold step of pushing up prices if they absolutely had to. Fundamentally, we shouldn't have set the tax before we knew what we needed to spend it on. For my part, I'll again be backing a budget that raises the tax by the lowest amount necessary to deliver fair outcomes, and that's the independent budget once again. Never mind a pee in the park. Some people here are spending taxpayer money like they're taking a pee in the dark. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Grant Stewart, next, please.
Thank you, Provost. Food is fundamental to life. It powers us and it sustains us and can emotionally nurture us. Perth and Kinross has hard-working agricultural businesses, to a world-renowned research and scientific agricultural institute, to active community groups, some of which we heard at the Climate Change and Sustainable Committee showcase last week. And it was gratifying to hear from across the chamber the impact that that showcase had. We heard that these groups work to reduce food waste, supporting access to good, nutritious food, to building climate-changing networks. I am pleased Good Food Nation is part of our budget. Our proactive approach has been taken to continue building support within Perth and Kinross to enhance food quality, maintain and improve our health, while sustaining practices being an overarching principle. I am delighted that it's just one of our investments. It is insightful and is part of a holistic approach in creating a fairer and healthier society. So I'll be supporting the SNP motion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Jack Welch with last comment.
Thank you, Provost. I support the SNP budget motion and thank council officers for their guidance and oversight. It's encouraging to see a number of collaborative, inclusive discussions that were held in advance of today reflected in the motion. This is what the people of Perth and Kinross want to see: effective and efficient local government, investing in communities and services, taking and implementing decisions. Specifically, I'd like to highlight our multi-million pound infrastructure investment decisions today for both our road networks and bridge structures. As a keen cyclist, improved road surfaces and reduction in potholes and improved road surfaces are to be welcomed. This is a timely investment and secures the future of the Perth and Kinross road transport system. I'd also like to highlight the budget motion supporting the instrumental music service. My 3 children attended a small rural primary school and benefited from the fantastic IMS service. I saw firsthand the positive impact and their confidence built through social interaction, learning new skills and being part of the IMS family. I'm grateful this is recognised within the budget settlement, and working across the council, a significant funding commitment has been secured. There are upcoming concerts on the 7th of March and 12th of April, and I encourage councillors here today to come along. With regards to our rural library service provision, we heard an impassioned presentation today to councillors highlighting the importance of the rural library service. Myself and other councillors in Ward 2 and other rural wards welcome this significant continuing funding to support the service, and importantly, the commitment from both library users and PKC officers to work together to reimagine, invest and develop a sustainable model going forward. Importantly, with professional librarian staff at their core.
Finally, my role as Perth and Kinross Digital Champion, I also support and welcome the significant early investment to develop our artificial intelligence capabilities as a council. The use of AI to support service delivery and quality should not be underestimated, and our skilled officers in the digital team are well placed to deliver this. Thank you, thank you, Provost, and as I say, I support the budget motion today.
Thank you, Councillor Welch. We now come to the movers of amendments to sum up in reverse order. Councillor Colin Stewart, do you wish to say anything in summing up your amendment?
Thank you, Provost. I would like to make a couple of points, but I don't want to take too long. I'm appalled that I have disappointed Councillor Forbes, and I promise to do better next year. I think the point, though, is that there are good ideas, or as the council leader is fond of saying, there's nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. Certainly, looking at the budgets of the other groups, I've seen some good ideas that I think we would like to incorporate and take forward. With the possible exception of the raising of council tax to these levels. We have, as Councillor Cuthbert was alluding to, asked a lot of questions of officers and had a lot of discussions with not only the finance and business support team, but also some of the strategic leads and wider beyond that. And we have come up with a budget in which we have rejected more pressures, rejected more cuts, implemented more savings, suggested more spending, taken more out of earmarked reserves and put more into unearmarked reserves, and provided a lower council tax and compound council tax over the 3-year period than any of the budgets here today. My point in saying this is that there is a different way of doing things. We don't have to just operate at the margins of the status quo. We can implement greater changes. Like I said earlier, I'm happy to take suggestions from other groups and incorporate them where we like them. Other groups are more than welcome to take suggestions from the independent group and incorporate them in their budgets in future years. I want to acknowledge the sort of cross-party nature of the consensus around the instrumental music service and the rural library closures. I think reversing those cuts will be extremely beneficial to our pupils and to our residents in rural communities. And thank the leader as well for taking on the proposal about the road flooding barriers. I think I will draw my remarks to a close there and once again commend our budget to the Chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Peter Barrett, would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Provost. I'm beginning to get worried in that I've now discovered I've got 3 things in common with Colin Stewart in terms of our approach to libraries, IMS and scams, and that's probably 3 more than I've thought we've had at any time in the previous decade. I'd also want to comment on the tone and the collaborative nature of the discussion and debate that we've had today, and I think in no small measure is that down to the leadership that was demonstrated by the head of finance last year in bringing forward a council tax strategy that would avoid I think the levels of stress and anguish that we've experienced as elected members before in having to consider really unpalatable service cuts and reductions in services. And you know, while I can see that, you know, everybody is not quite at the 10% mark, I think that has made a kind of quantum shift in the type of debate that we have in this chamber. I think there is a high degree of overlap, if not congruity, between our budget amendment and the SNP's original motion, and I think the adoption of, you know, a number of items, over a dozen items from our budget, has improved the amended motion considerably, and despite being exhorted by a number of my group members to withdraw our amendment and vote for the amended motion, I'm not minded to do that at this stage. I think our amendment stands in comparison to that of the Conservative group and the Independent group, and is the best option B in front of the chamber. And you know, I would like to give members of the administration the opportunity to take the baby step that I referred to earlier, and leave us with a choice between the Liberal Democrat amendment and the amended motion at the final stage. I think we have made an impact on the budget proposals today. By my very rough and ready reckoning, 90% of the lines in our budget have been adopted in whole or in part into the amended budget motion, and something like 83% of the value of our budget proposals is made it through to the amended motion as well. So, yeah, Councillor Grant-Lang readily admits that he doesn't have a monopoly on wisdom, and I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think Tommy McEwen selective vision in terms of other political parties playing politics at budget times was highly amusing, as was Councillor Keith Allen and Angus Forbes trying to make out that there was a huge distinction between their council tax setting and the Liberal Democrats, which I think comes to a whole 46 pence or 56 pence a week when it boils down to the final analysis. So we'll be keeping our budget motion in and encouraging everybody to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Duff, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Provost. I think we've all had to put forward council tax rises higher than we would otherwise have wanted to this year. There is a clear difference between the hikes of 9.5% and 9.75% by the SNP and Lib Dems, and the more considerate 8% and 7.5% from the Conservatives and Independents. In my speech, I outlined the principal reasons for this. Chief amongst them has to be the need for the Scottish Government to provide local authorities with a fairer share of their budget. A rise of just 2.2% in cash terms is not satisfactory. I would echo the comments of my Deputy Councillor Shires. There is a Scottish Parliament consultation out at the moment on this subject, and I would encourage everyone in this chamber and anyone listening, but also community groups and residents, to respond to the consultation, highlighting this failure and its impact on local democracy and finance. Provost, I think we've had a good airing of all four budgets today. As the Leader of the Council has stated, and it's been oft repeated, we can all have good ideas, and I welcome the comments from Councillor Lang that will allow the Scottish Conservatives to bring forward the proposals on ASN and childcare support to our future Finance and Resources meeting. I also welcome the additional funds to the Armed Forces Champion, which will help to commemorate two important events this year, the 80th anniversary of VA Day and the VJ Day. Can I also wish Bailey Ahern good luck for his nomination in the Scottish Forces in Business Awards in Glasgow this evening, where he's up for an award in the Inspiration of the Year category. With that, Provost, I'll round off my summing up. I believe at 8% council tax, our budget amendment is fair and is considerate of our council taxpayers and our reserves position. I commend our budget amendment to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Mr. Leader, do you wish to sum up?
I'll be very brief. I think we've had a lot of good discussions, and yes, I will commit to the door being open at all times as extra funding comes in. I think we should all discuss how it should be spent with the ASM provision and the Liberal Democrats outreach pupil support resource. And I've mentioned that already a couple of times, that will be definitely considered moving forward. I think I've enjoyed the debate. It's been good humoured, and I think somebody put in the chat that I wish I had a pound or a pint for every time somebody said they'd been collegiate, so I must be doing something right. But you can only be collegiate if people are willing to be collegiate back with you. And so I'd like to thank all the groups for being involved in discussions, and hopefully moving forward we can do that. This is just a day the budget decisions are being made. Decisions can be varied through the finance and resources with the change in finances that we've got. So I'd just like to thank everybody. I do like Councillor Barrett, I will not be withdrawing the SNP motion in favour of the Liberal Democrat amendment. So I commend everybody for their work, but especially all the officers who've helped us get through there in all different teams. And I'd like the lead officers who are here, and we've thanked, to go back to each of their teams and legal and across the board to thank them on our behalf for everything they do every day, but especially time and commitment that they've given over the last 5 or 6 weeks, especially. So thank you all.
Councillor Robertson.
It's not me.
It is you.
It's not me.
Maybe the digital champion can help you after any time. Mr. Henry, would you like to take a roll call?
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 4 on the agenda, the strategic planning update and 2026-27 to 28-29 general fund revenue budget report by strategic lead finance and business support. We have a motion by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Drysdale, the terms of which were circulated this morning and were headed up Scottish National Party. The motion also includes the response that the leader outlined to both the rural libraries and the PH2O project petitions this morning, and includes the revisions and incorporations from the amendments that were circulated earlier this afternoon. We have a first amendment from Councillor Duff, seconded by Councillor Chan, headed up Scottish Conservative and Unionist Group. We have a second amendment by Councillor Peter Barrett, seconded by Bailey McLaren, that was headed up Scottish Liberal Democrats Group. And we have a third amendment by Councillor Colin Stewart, seconded by Bailey Brock, headed up Independent Group. In terms of standing orders, the amendments will be put against each other until we have a substantive amendment to put to the motion. So first of all, the second amendment will be put against the third amendment. So for the first vote, can members confirm if they're voting for the second amendment by Councillor Barrett or the third amendment by Councillor Stewart? Bailey Ahern.
Abstain.
Councillor Allen.
Abstain.
Councillor Anderson.
Abstain.
Bailey.
Third amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Second amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Second amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Abstain.
Bailey Brock.
Third amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Chan.
Abstain.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Third amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
Abstain.
Councillor Forbes.
Abstain.
Councillor Frampton.
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater.
Abstain.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
Abstain.
Councillor James.
Abstain.
Councillor Kugali.
Abstain.
Councillor Lang.
Abstain.
Councillor McPherson.
Abstain.
Councillor Mayor.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Provost.
Third amendment.
Councillor McEwen,
Abstain.
Bailey McLaren,
Second.
thank you. Deputy Provost,
Abstain.
Councillor Rebeck,
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson,
Second Amendment.
Councillor Shires,
Abstain.
Councillor Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Third Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Abstain.
Councillor Watt,
Second Amendment.
Councillor Waters,
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh,
Abstain.
and Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 5 votes for the Second Amendment, 5 votes for the Third Amendment, with 30 abstentions. So can you confirm in terms of standing orders if you're casting your casting vote and confirm what your vote is?
I will vote for the Third Amendment.
Thank you. The Third Amendment is therefore carried and now becomes the Second Amendment. So the next vote is to vote for the First Amendment by Councillor Duff or the Second Amendment by Councillor Stewart. Bailey Ahern.
First Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
First Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
First Amendment.
Bailey.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Abstain.
Councillor Braun.
First Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Abstain.
Councillor Chan.
First Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Second Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Abstain.
Councillor Drysdale.
Abstain.
Councillor Duff.
First Amendment.
Councillor Forbes.
First Amendment.
Councillor Frampton.
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater.
First Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Illingworth.
First Amendment.
Councillor James.
First Amendment.
Councillor Kogali.
First Amendment.
Councillor Lane.
Abstain.
Councillor McPherson.
Abstain.
Councillor Mayer.
Abstain.
Councillor Massey.
Abstain.
Councillor McCall.
Abstain.
Provost.
Second Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Abstain.
Bailey McLaren.
Abstain.
Deputy Provost.
Abstain.
Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson.
Abstain.
Councillor Shires.
First Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
First Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
My amendment. I mean, Second Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Abstain.
Councillor Watt.
Abstain.
Councillor Waters.
Abstain.
Councillor Welsh.
Abstain.
And Bailey Williamson.
Abstain.
Provost, we have 13 votes for the First Amendment, 5 votes for the Second Amendment, and 22 abstentions. So the First Amendment is therefore carried and now becomes a substantive amendment. So for the final vote, can I ask members now to confirm if you're voting for the motion by Councillor Lang or the amendment by Councillor Duff? Bailey Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Bailey.
No vote.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Motion.
Councillor Carr.
Motion.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson,
Motion.
Councillor Drysdale,
Motion. Motion.
Councillor Duff,
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes,
Amendment.
Councillor Frampton,
Motion.
Councillor Freshwater,
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey,
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth,
Amendment.
Councillor James,
Amendment.
Councillor Kogali,
Amendment.
Councillor Lang,
Motion.
Councillor McPherson,
Motion.
Councillor Mayor,
Motion.
Councillor Massey,
Motion.
Councillor McCall,
Motion.
Provost,
Motion.
Councillor McEwen,
Motion.
Gilly McLaren,
Motion.
Deputy Provost,
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck,
Motion.
Councillor Robertson,
Motion.
Councillor Shires,
Amendment.
Councillor Smith,
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Grant Stewart,
Motion.
Councillor Watt,
Motion.
Councillor Waters,
Motion.
Councillor Welsh,
Motion.
and Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
Provost, we have 26 votes for the motion. We have 13 votes for the amendment and 1 abstention, so the motion is therefore carried.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendry. Members, we're going to take a 5-minute comfort break at this point, and then we're going to return for the capital budget. Good afternoon again, members. We now return to item 5, which is Strategic Investment and Composite Capital Budget Update 2025-26 through to 2030-31. Mr. Walker is back at his podium and is ready to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, councillors. This report seeks to provide an update on our strategic investment requirements and seeks to update the 25-26 to 30-31 composite capital budget. Section 3 provides a reminder that the Council has an approved capital budget in place through to 29-30. The last update to the Finance and Resources Committee on the 5th of February set out spending plans of just over £623 million through to 29-30. The approved capital budget has been updated regularly following consideration by the Finance and Resources Committee. Section 4 provides a summary of the total investment required in order to maintain our existing levels of service. Table 1 provides a summary of the £3.324 billion of investment required over the next 30 years through to 2053-54. The table also splits the level of investment by asset stream, with our property estate accounting for 66% of the investment requirement and roads a further 20%. At paragraph 4.8, I highlight the role that the Strategic Investment Advisory Group can take in shaping our future capital investment prior to formal decisions being taken by Council or Committee. In Section 5, I'm seeking authority to make a small number of adjustments to the existing capital budget, and these are summarised in Table 2. In Section 7, I'm seeking authority to include financial year 2030-31. By doing so, the Council is maintaining its commitment to having in place a 6-year capital budget. Table 3 identifies new resources of £40.750 million from a variety of funding sources. At this time, I'm seeking authority to apply these resources to the existing programmes, and these are set out in Table 4. This means that £6.246 million remains unallocated for 30-31 at this time, and this is shown in Table 5. In Section 8, there's also a reminder of the approved funding strategy that has committed 1.25% of future council tax income each year to supporting our capital budget. Colleagues and I are happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions for Mr. Walker on the report? A question from Bailey on the CTLR.
Thank you for entertaining me. My question is actually more specifically on Perth Transport Futures, and I was looking back at that website and looking at the phase 4 specifically, and then comparing that with the papers we have in front of us, and couldn't find any specific mention to the active travel improvements, etc., that are promised in phase 4. Do we have anything in the capital budget as things stand for phase 4 of Perth Transport Futures, please?
Thank you for your question, Billy. We have a few lines in the capital program in relation to actions and activities in line with Perth Transport Future Phase 4. I don't know if you remember, we had the Golden Route, we have the Perth People's Place. We've got a few of these lines. The intention is maybe to try to review how they effectively split and maybe bring them together to create a coherent package to support Phase 4 of Perth Transport Futures.
Thank you. That's reassuring. And could you remind me of the amounts that are beside those, please?
I don't have the figures just with me, but I can provide you with these figures after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James next, please.
Thank you, Provost. I don't know if this is the right time to ask, but I just noticed on 7.7 expenditures on the table 4, there's expenditure for ICT infrastructure and also school audio visual. As somebody who's really struggled today, if I'm honest, because I've heard nothing other than when I plug my headset into my laptop, will there be in the ICT infrastructure expenditure something to do with a loop system for this chamber and our audio visual aids in here, please?
In regards to the AV programme, that's mostly related to Promethean boards in schools, but we are progressing separately with reviewing the equipment in here.
Thank you. Councillor John Duff.
Thank you. Scott, you touched briefly on the contribution of 1.25% from the council tax each year. I just wonder if you could remind us the difference that is making to our capital budget over a period of time, please.
Okay. So the 1.25% is we have brought scenarios to council before which suggest our capital fund, which we use as the sort of the balancing fund to get us through the capital expenditure. That was due to run out in the late 20s, and I think that's earlier than we'd ever seen. So the 1.25%, when it's compounded through, it takes us to the late 70s, and based on the current programme of expenditure. So it buys us a significant amount of time in terms of a sustainable capital budget.
Thank you. That's a helpful reminder of the benefit of that particular decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. Mr. Walker, just obviously we had we're talking about PH0 this morning, and I know we've talked in the past about the 90 million which is allocated. Has that 90 million physically been borrowed in that large capital fund we have, and therefore are we making payments on that, or hasn't been? If it hasn't been, how do we actually allocate it in simple terms? How do we allocate that amount?
So it's not been borrowed because that way we're borrowing in advance of need. We will borrow it when we're required to spend it in line with our cash flow requirements.
So we talk about being allocated. So how does that work into the figures? Sorry.
So there's a difference between the budget and what we will borrow for our cash flow purposes. We've got a 6-year funded programme that hopefully you will just approve just now. We will borrow in line with the requirements because obviously there'll be slippage sometimes. So we wouldn't want to borrow in advance if we didn't have to, because there is a cost of carrying borrowing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks, Provost. Mr. Walker, you were talking about the updated total borrowing, or sorry, total plan of 3.324 billion. Do you have an indication of what that was increased from, and what also that is not updated for inflation? Do you have an idea of what that would be if inflation were included?
So I'll deal with the second question first. It is not updated for inflation. That would have to be factored in as we progress with the plan. And I'm looking to my colleagues to see what the figure used to be, and if we can't have it, we can share that with you. It'll also be part of the work we do with the Strategic Investment Advisory Group going forward. So we'll get a figure for you.
And the first part of the question was, do we know what 3.324 is up from? It said this was an updated figure from the Corporate Asset Management Framework early last year.
Well, we can circulate the information once we've dug it out.
Okay, Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. Yeah, I'm quite shocked actually. I mean, this is £3,324 million that we're talking about investing. I appreciate it's over a 30-year period, but given that we borrow on a 50-year period, that would mean we'd be sitting with 3.324 million paying interest on it, and that, if I calculate correctly, is about £166 million a year we'll be paying in interest. Is that right?
So just to be clear, we're not suggesting we're going to borrow £3.324 billion. That is what our asset stream leads have identified in terms of the levels of need based on our existing levels of service. So that figure, we will spend less than that. The report indicates that we will be looking to disinvest in some assets and invest in others. But it's a calculated figure by our asset stream leads that we'll work with the Strategic Investment Advisory Group to refine and share the detail with you. But we're not going to be borrowing £3.324 billion.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions, so Mr. Walker, you may sit down, hopefully for the final time today. Mr. Leader, would you like to move a motion?
Okay, thanks, Provost. Provost, the financial challenges we've discussed during our revenue budget discussions today inevitably impact our capital budget as well. We continue to see the rising costs of goods and services affecting our capital programme and having to be taken into account when planning. But it's important to recognise that we are in a stronger place than many local authorities. The decision last year to ring-fence 1% of all future council tax increases and put it towards the loan charges budget was a good start. And increasing that to 1.25% as a result of today's earlier decision will also help ensure sustainability of our capital projects going forward. This is funding which is important to our communities, which helps deliver on our ambitions. And while it may take longer to come to fruition than the decisions which we made earlier today, the capital budget is an important part of our forward planning. It is that planning which helped bring to reality Destiny Bridge and the New Kingsway, which open at the end of next month, bringing new active travel options across the Tay and diverting unnecessary traffic from the city centre, helping improve the air quality for residents and visitors. It's what's helping us deliver the replacement Perth High School, which will open to pupils after the summer holidays, and the new Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, which we hope to have an opening date for shortly. These are all projects which were debated and backed through previous capital budgets, projects which are now becoming a reality. But we also need to be realistic about our ambitions. That's why this council agreed a slimmed down version of PH2O last September, a decision which has again been reinforced by the updated costs for the original outline business case. But it's important to remember that while the Timber plan is expected to cost less, we are retaining the £90 million allocated in the capital budget to be able to support other aspects of the leisure assets review, including retaining the flexibility to consider options for leisure water at Thimble. And when officers bring back these to council as requested in June, investment in other Perth and Kinross swimming facilities which were highlighted in the Leisure Assets Review, and it's also to provide funding to support bringing Bell Sports Centre back into use. Something which we are committed to do, although we are waiting on the options emerging from the recent public consultation and the submissions which have come in before we make a decision on exactly what that will look like. Looking ahead, I welcome the fact that the CIAG will play a significant role in the development of future capital investment, and I look forward to playing an active part in this cross-party forum. By approving the recommendations put before us today and building on the funding confirmed in the revenue budget, we're continuing to prudently invest in the future of all of Perth and Kinross. Provost, I'm happy to move the capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Mr. Deputy Leader, second.
Thank you, Provost. Briefly, with approved net capital expenditure of over 483 million planned for the next 6 years, including the major projects the Leader has made reference to, it is clear that this council is very much investing in the future of Perth and Kinross for the benefit of generations to come, and so I'm very happy to second the capital budget motion.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Leader. Are there any amendments or comments? Comment of Councillor John Duff.
Thank you, Provost. Can I start by thanking Mr. Jennings, Mr. Walker and their team for the comprehensive paper and the capital budget before us this afternoon. The capital programme is significant and will provide us with a number of challenges in the future, not least in terms of funding. However, as stated in my summing up on the revenue budget, a fairer settlement for all local authorities would help here too. I welcome the progress that is being made on a number of our current capital projects. We look forward to the forthcoming openings both of the Crosstay Link Road, Destiny Bridge in New Kingsway and the Blairgowrie Recreation Centre, and also the provision of the new Perth High School. I would like to see greater progress being made on Perth West in coming years as well. On the matter of PH2O, it was a pity that the mover of the petition wasn't able to join us this morning. However, I would like to thank him for his efforts in raising the petition and for his Say No to Thimble Roll campaign. There are a number of outstanding issues in connection with our sports and leisure offering here in Perth and Kinross. The Dewars feasibility study, the Bell Sports Centre consultation, the leisure water option for PH2O, etc. And I welcome the opportunity which will be afforded to us at the June Council meeting to consider all these matters in the round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. Before I start, if I may, I'd like to join others in saying I've sat through, I think, 8 budgets now since I joined the council, and I think this has been one of the most, if not the most, good-humoured and well-mannered debate that we've had on the budget. So I think we should all congratulate ourselves on that. Our colleague, Councillor Shah, has touched on this earlier, and I'd like to follow through on that. I'd take the opportunity of thanking the Leader of the Council and the Administration for recognising the serious concerns of residents of both Blairgowrie and Rattray regarding flooding issues. My colleagues, both and myself, attended the Surface Water Management public consultation, which recommended 5 proposals to mitigate flooding, which is becoming a more regular occurrence. All 5 were to be submitted to SEPA for consideration for funding, which would not take place before 2028. We've now provided capital funding for 2 of these options, which will be well welcomed by all. However, although the funding is now in place, there is still a long process to bring these proposals to fruition, designs to be created, consultations to carry out, permissions to be sought. And this could take another 3 or even more years. But what we have done, of course, is cut that first 3 years out, which would have had to have waited for SEPA funding. And if I may now touch on another subject, which is PH2O. I too welcome the fact that in June we will have a chance to look through various updates on this project. But we have heard a petition this morning, which has been signed by many, many people. This is, I think, a situation where it's important that we now take time to think this through. This is a major development for Perth itself and for the people of Perth. I think we should think very carefully how this project progresses and is developed. And obviously, I was named in the petition this morning, so my view is obviously there, but my thoughts are, and they remain, that simply this, that whatever PH2O is, whatever form it takes, it belongs at Glover Street and nowhere else. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. At risk of again spoiling the bon hum a little in the room, which I do appreciate, I would wish for my dissent to be noted against this item, just because as a signatory of the PH2O petition, I don't think that the funding in this capital budget allows for that, and so therefore I wouldn't want my name to be against it. Thank you.
Councillor Rebick.
Thanks very much. I'll be really brief, Provost. I think as convener of Learning and Families, it would be remiss of me not to also mention that I'm really looking forward to the opening of not only the Blair Gowrie Rec, but clearly Perth High School as well. But also just to further note that although it'll be relatively small amounts of money, it will be important amounts of capital money that we will need for our intensive support provision expansion, which is really important actually. And I just want to thank colleagues across the chamber and the Learning and Families Committee for their support of that expansion. It will be really important. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. Councillor Chan.
Thank you, Provost. I'll also just touch briefly on PH2O. It'll become no surprise to you that I'll quickly mention about a fully developed PH2O at Glover Street. Would be much more than a local asset, but it'd be a destination. Imagine a site with a state-of-art leisure pool, standard Olympic standard training facility, sports halls, and a modern ice rink, a combination found nowhere else in the area. That is a unique selling point. That is something that would probably bring tourists, competitions, and national events to Perth. I totally understand the financial challenges, but remember, it's not just about cost, it's about value. I totally believe that Perth deserves better, our residents deserve better, our children, athletes and visitors deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. I had hoped not to speak on this particular subject, but I feel I must, and that's on the subject of PH2O. First of all, I don't think it belongs in any one single site. I'm old enough to remember when it was both the swimming pool and the ice rink were both in Dunkeld Road, and there was a hue and cry at the time about it moving to the other side of the city. And then lo and behold, once it moved, it was perfectly at home where it was. So I don't think we can say it belongs in any single geographic area. But the thing I'm finding a little bit disingenuous this afternoon is the protestations about the lack of ambition and about the location. From when I was elected in 2017, this subject of PH2O was very high in the agenda. And as the ward councillor for that particular area, one of the ward councillors, I'm very much aware of how important it is to not just to the local community, but the wider Perth community. However, when I dared to suggest that perhaps there was a lack of ambition at that time, I was basically shot down in flames, being told that there was no money and that we couldn't afford it by the previous administration. I believe the same had gone on at the administration before. The dithering delay of the last administration, including failing to include PH2O as a priority in their final capital budget, has led us to this particular place. And I, for one, am pleased that we have at least made a decision that we will not be left without any services at all in terms of swimming services in Perth and Kinross, because the leisure pool as it currently stands, and everyone who has been a councillor here for any length of time will know that it's not sustainable the way it is. It's too expensive to run. It was closed again at the weekend. So to come up with objections without any tangible, concrete, credible solutions is not serving anybody well, particularly not any of our constituents across the whole of Perth and Kinross. So while it may not be the solution that everybody would want, I think we're better to have made a decision and to have agreed that we will utilise the Thimble Row site, that we own already, and we will build a leisure pool facility and swimming facilities on that site. There is still work ongoing to determine the final design, so any suggestions that something will be included or won't be included is perhaps a bit premature. But I really do wish that people who are raising the objections, who are here before particularly, would take a good long hard look at themselves and ask what contribution they made to the current situation. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Councillor Peter Barrett with final comment.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think it is a bit rich on budget day of all days when all groups have had the opportunity to set out their revenue budget plans and their council tax or their approach to council tax setting. That those that are making the warm words about PH2O to the petitioners haven't actually backed up those warm words with a single penny. And I think that is, disingenuous in the extreme. I think, arguing that you've got a more responsible approach to council tax setting when you're ignoring what you see as your major capital expenditure items in the future, and are trying to lead people to believe that you're going to fund projects of in excess of 120 million when there's only 60 to 90 available, again is pure cynicism. So I think it's, on this day of all days, it's time to call out that sort of nonsense. If people in this chamber believe us, they're perfectly entitled to that they want to have a facility in Glover Street and they want to spend 60 million more pounds on it, then that's fair enough. But they need to have set out, today, what their approach to smoothing the financial transition to be able to afford that, and how they would have set out the capital requirements to do so. And they've not done that. They're just playing people for mugs.
I'm now going to come to the Leader of the Council to sum up if he wishes.
I look at the clock and say I'm perfectly happy not to forgo that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leader. I would like to just say a few closing words, which is to thank all members across the chamber. In my, whatever this is now, 7, 8 budgets. We've done 8 budgets, I think we're at this point. This has been the most collegiate, I think. Although I would say that over the last few years, since Leader of the Council became Leader of the Council, he has endeavoured to take a collegiate approach, not just at budget time, but actually throughout the year, to incorporate suggestions from other groups. And he will be on his tombstone saying that nobody has a monopoly on wisdom. Not that we're rushing that along, obviously. I would also just like to put on record my thanks to the officers, both senior and those working in the engine room below them. And a lot goes into the budget process, but actually also a lot goes into budget day as well. A lot of things have happened behind the scenes to make this happen. So particular thanks also to all the staff and the committee team and legal and governance who make all of this appear so smoothly, despite Councillor Robertson's best efforts. I would also just like to wish Baillie Ahern, and I'm sure we all wish Baillie Ahern the best of luck tonight. He does a huge amount as our Armed Forces champion, and we wish him all the best in the awards. Have a safe journey home, members, and we'll see you all next week.